Rohan Patel, comic book movie.
You can
Hey,
begin.
Lena. Hey,
Hi.
Leon. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. You're the you're the first Indian filmmaker I've ever gotten to interview, so I'm
Nice.
very grateful for the opportunity. So I just wanted to ask. I really enjoyed Flora, and I also love Tiger Hunter. My dad had a lot of similar experiences when he came from India initially, so
Oh, thank
that
you.
was that hit home. But so like when you're tackling this big massive Disney movie, which is your first big studio movie after your previous experience on where you had to crowdfund and it was basically an indie film. So what was your experience like on this big studio project?
It was really weird because there was a lot of similarities. Like my movie was also kind of we were trying to make something that looked like a bigger budget than it was. And it's weird because even at this level we were trying to do this on this too. Like there's a lot of CGI and there's stunts and there's children and there's all sorts of things fitting it into kind of like a mid-level budget too. So there's those same challenges, which was really weird. But then a huge difference is you're working with a studio, so you're not the only boss, which was kind of a new dynamic because it was it was something to I had to learn to get used to, but it actually, I mean, it ended up pushing us to what was good because you had to figure out a way to keep things that were in your comic sensibilities and in your vision, but still get, the studio within sort of what they were looking for too, which just basically made you challenge yourself and kind of push things further until like you couldn't argue with it, like this is definitely a better pitch. And so there was a lot of debate back and forth, so many like fights, debates, where I'm like, no, it has to be that. At the end I'm like, no, you got to push yourself, find something that like they'll say yes to, and that ended up being better anyway.
Awesome. Yeah, it came out really well. And you mentioned CGI. And so were you using similar technology to like what Marvel does with like Rocket or like what they did with Sonic last year? Or how was that a unique challenge?
We did a little bit of mix of everything. For the most part, we started with nothing and we did the traditional sort of like we had to build for Ulysses. Matilda is a really good actress, so we didn't have to do as much. Sometimes we started off with a lot of different ways for her to interact with Ulysses, but that would require more work on the post end to take those things out. So ultimately, I all I had to do was puppet Ulysses, do it a few times, and she would understand what's happening, even for like a 2-minute scene. And she'd be able to walk along with that so that we could build the model and do most of the creation in post.
Yeah, Matilda's a real gem. She was really great.
Yeah.
Um, so like when you're like even like with Flora and with Tiger Hunter, you have like this earnestness, this like real heart to these films. Is that something like an element that you always sort of strive for when realizing your projects?
Um, it kind of depends if it's right for the movie. I have a like right now I'm working on a dark comedy about a magician with chronic depression. It's like kind of like darker than this, but I guess it has that sort of sincerity in it somehow in its weird playful way, and that just might be something that's maybe it's in me, so I guess it might just come out that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it really works in the context of the movie. And so at the beginning of the movie, you reference a lot of Matilda. I mean, her character is a very big comics fan, so like you reference a bunch of different Marvel comics, DC comics. So are there any like characters that you wanted to see like reference in the film, or like that you'd like to pursue as a filmmaker?
Well, I had to put Miss Marvel in there. I
Yeah,
was like, that's got to be in there. Let's get that in the trailer too, because it just makes me happy. I was so excited. When this was done, I really, really wanted to shoot part of Miss Marvel, the TV show, but I was in post
yeah.
production at the same time that they were shooting. This was pre pandemic. So they staffed up and I wasn't able to do both. But if that was ever made into a movie, that's my number one. But other than that, I'm a big X-Men fan. So um,
Awesome. Yeah, same here.
yeah, we used to have something where Ulysses was doing this and he had something like some branches coming off of his paws and he looked like Wolverine for a moment. Uh,
Yeah.
but Marvel said that's like 1 degree too much, so it didn't pass clearances.
Okay. Yeah.
We got
Yeah.
away
You
with
got.
a lot, but not everything.
Yeah. Yeah. There's plenty of reference, the superhero landing and everything.
Yeah.
Uh, So I read a little bit about your early when you decided to go to film school and everything, and I mean we've had similar experience as first generation immigrants where your parents are pushing you one direction and then you won't actually want to pursue what you're good at. So what was your motivation to pursue film school, and like what kind of movies or filmmakers were you inspired by like as a young filmmaker?
I like so many things. I mean, it's weird because I got into film for people that aren't the type of movies that I would make. Like I I didn't I was doing I had finished poli sci in history. I thought I was going to teach. And so I was like, I've always been making movies my whole life. Maybe I could use that as a way to, teach through that, except like with entertainment and hopefully in a way that doesn't feel like it's a teaching movie, just something that kind of like moves the conversation forward. So I always, really respected like people like Spike Lee who were able to like do so much to kind of like tell stories for a community or issues and things like that. But me myself, like aesthetically, like I love people like Edgar Wright or Danny Boyle or Taika Waititi. Like those guys are amazing in my book. Like I think you just need to be able to take those sort of playful risks and have fun with it and not like hold to a formula. And I think that's the sort of thing I love most.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, no, I love all those filmmakers you named. I was so I don't know if you did you grow up on watching like Indian films like Bollywood and stuff like that, or because my mom grew up raised us on all that stuff.
I didn't as much. I felt like I watched the big one that came every 3 years. They'd be like Dil To Pagal Hai and then Kuch Kuch Hota Hai. Other
Yeah,
than that, I have two older brothers who were a big influence. So like my favorite movies growing up were things like The Usual Suspects and Seven. Like so
yeah, yeah,
they're very different from the sort of things that I might be doing. Although I'd love to do something like that.
yeah, yeah. No, no. I mean, you can see I was a big Shah Rukh Khan fan as well, so that's
Yeah.
you can see him behind me. But so like when you're like you do a lot of stuff for South Asian filmmakers, and I read a little bit about like all the activism you do. But so when you're like meeting these young filmmakers now, what kind of advice do you give them? Because I read something about how you're like it is a business, so like you can't be naive when you're like stepping into when you're like trying to make these films nowadays.
I think there's a few things when I meet people, especially people from minority communities, because we often this is a problem that happens. At first I'm like, okay, make sure that your stuff isn't just good enough for your community, but is good enough for everybody. Because we get so excited when we see rising talent in our community that they have like a new YouTube skit and things like that. That you have to make sure that that's not enough. You have to keep working at it and keep honing it so that even the really critical people will like what you're doing. And then I basically tell them, go ahead and try it as long as you're willing to fail for like 10 years before you get any success.
Yeah,
And then go ahead and try it.
yeah. No, I mean I'm one of those people. I've been trying, so we'll see. But
Takes a bit.
yeah, so like I guess you worked with Danny Pudi now twice. Is this do you look at him as sort of a good luck charm on your projects now, or is that a collaboration you want to keep going on?
Oh, he's not just a good luck charm. He is just an amazing. He is the most lovely person ever. An actor. He is an actor to beat so many actors. Like I will put him in every movie I ever do if it's possible, as long as I live.
Yeah, no, he's fantastic, and you have such a great cast too. So like, could you maybe just like finding Matilda because you have Allison Hannigan, Ben Schwartz, Kate, Danny. These are all like Janine Garofalo's in the scene, I think, as well. And so, what was the casting? Just finding Matilda herself because she's just really
It was
she
hard.
stands out completely.
Yeah, we had Emily Schwaber, our casting director, who was leading this effort, which was very difficult. She helped us kind of look through over 1,000 girls, and it was very hard to find somebody who has that same like maturity and vulnerability, but also that kind of that dry humor. Like you have to, she's
Yeah,
basically a young Juno, and that's really hard
yeah,
to find in a 10-year-old. We found so we found nobody else but Matilda. Like I told Sean Bailey at Disney when we were first submitting our people, and you have to submit three. But I told him, I was like, I can't imagine this movie with anybody except for Matilda. And so fortunately he agreed. And so that worked out.
yeah. And so, I guess you've mentioned that you're working on a dark comedy now. So, when can we? Are you working on anything else besides that,
I'm
or
doing
can
a
you speak
couple
more on
like
that project?
I'm doing a few things at the same time, so I'm not sure which one will go first. These days, this month I'm a little busy because I've been directing for that TV show, that Netflix show, Never Have I Ever. Uh,
Hmm.
Otherwise, I have kind of like this old folktale that I'm making into this weird comedy, and then this dark comedy magician. It's a really weird project. It's by the screenwriter Mark Lehner, who just debuted his new novel, which is just a crazy, insane, weird book. So you can only imagine what his screenplays are like. But
Yeah.
those are the things I'm working on right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Lena, and love the film. So good luck, and hope I'll get to talk to you again someday.
Okay, awesome talking to you.
Thank you.